What happens when the man everyone thinks doesn't belong turns out to be the one signing their paychecks? Let me tell you about something that happened in downtown Phoenix. Not some far-off city or made-up story. Real street, real building. Could have been today, could be tomorrow. It was just after 9:45 a.m. on a Tuesday. The Arizona heat hadn't kicked into high gear yet, but the pavement still shimmered like it was holding secrets. Jamal Preston pulled into the underground parking lot of Stratwell Solutions headquarters, 4 levels deep, glass all the way up. The kind of building where your footsteps echo a little too loud if you're not wearing the right shoes. He didn't flinch at the silence, though. He walked like he owned the place. Because now, he did. Jamal stepped out of a sleek, dark electric sedan. Not flashy, but clean, confident. Just like his charcoal gray suit. You ever see someone who doesn't have to say anything to let you know they mean business? That was Jamal. Pressed cuffs, shoes with no scuffs, briefcase tucked tight under his arm, not a hair out of place on his low fade. He took a second before entering. Not for nerves, Jamal didn't rattle easy, but because he liked walking in on his terms. Head high, shoulders relaxed. He pushed through the revolving doors into a lobby that looked more like a museum than an office. Polished marble floors, a water feature bubbling near the front desk, modern art scattered around like someone was trying real hard to say, "We're important." And yet, the space felt cold. Not because of the AC, because of what was about to happen. He crossed the lobby, eyes set on the elevators at the far end. He already knew the floor, the room, the agenda. He had run this scenario in his head a dozen times. This was his first official day stepping in as CEO of Stratwell Solutions after Preston & Company Ventures finalized the $10 million acquisition. The merger had been in the works for over a year. Quiet negotiations, sleepless nights, carefully calculated moves. And now here he was, ready to walk into a meeting that would define the next chapter of a company trying to save itself. But that's not where the story really begins. Just 10 steps from the elevators, someone stepped into his path. "Hold up," said a man, broad-shouldered, middle-aged, with thinning blonde hair, khaki slacks, and a Stratwell badge clipped to his polo shirt. The kind of guy who looked like he'd been there forever and planned to retire in the building. Jamal stopped. Not out of obedience, just curiosity. "You lost or something?" the man asked, not even waiting for a reply before glancing him up and down. "Deliveries go through the loading dock on the south side." Jamal took a breath, calm, measured. He'd seen this movie before. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. meeting," he replied. "Conference room B." The man frowned. "That's executive level, reserved for senior leadership only." Jamal nodded slowly. "I know." The man didn't budge. "Then I'll need you to wait over there. Someone will come down if you're expected." There was no name exchange, no sir, no assumption of possibility, just a full stop. For a second, Jamal considered pushing past him, but that's not who he was. He didn't make noise for attention. He let the truth do the talking. "I'm Jamal Preston," he said simply, eyes locked in. "Preston & Co." The man didn't flinch, didn't register the name. Or maybe he did, but didn't connect it to this man, this skin, this presence. Then came a voice from behind them, sharp, out of breath. "There you are, Mr. Preston." A woman in a navy skirt suit holding a tablet hurrying across the lobby. "We've been waiting upstairs. So sorry for the delay. Conference room B is ready." You could almost hear the record scratch. The man stepped back, eyes darting between Jamal and the woman, his mouth open just slightly, as if to explain something that suddenly felt pointless. Jamal gave him a small nod, polite but pointed, then turned and walked to the elevator. But what happens inside that elevator is just the start of something deeper, something that would shake that entire office to its core. The elevator doors slid open with that soft metallic whisper, and Jamal stepped in alone. He hit the button for the 18th floor and didn't look back. But as the doors were closing, they were stopped by a hand, the same man from the lobby. He stepped in quickly, keeping his eyes forward. His badge read, Rick Donnelly, Facilities Manager. Neither of them said a word at first, just the hum of the elevator and the soft clink of Rick's keys on his belt. Jamal didn't look over. He didn't need to, but Rick couldn't help himself. "Didn't realize you were the CEO," he said, like the words scratched his throat on the way out. Jamal turned slightly, finally meeting his eyes, calm, level. "You didn't ask." Rick shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "It's just, We get all kinds of people walking through. You can't be too careful these days." "Is that right?" Jamal asked, still quiet. Not angry, just there, the kind of presence that makes you sit up straighter. Rick nodded, already realizing the hole he was digging. "You understand?" "No," Jamal replied, flat. "I don't." The elevator dinged. Floor 18. Doors opened. Jamal stepped out, briefcase in hand, without another glance. But Rick followed, mumbling something about checking the AC unit in the conference room. His voice was quieter now, like he was shrinking with every step. The hallway was quiet. Frosted glass walls on both sides, sleek desks, muted colors. Executives in fitted blazers and shiny shoes glanced up as Jamal passed. A few stood, straightened their ties. They'd read the emails. They knew who he was. And yet, some of them still looked surprised. That's the thing. Even when you should belong, you still have to prove it. Inside conference room B, a long glass table stretched across the room, 12 leather chairs, bottles of mineral water lined up like chess pieces. A massive screen flickered with the Stratwell logo. As Jamal walked in, conversation quieted. Everyone stood. A tall man with a silver goatee stepped forward. "Mr. Preston, welcome. We're honored to have you here." "Thank you, Charles," Jamal said, shaking his hand firmly. "Let's get started." But before he could sit, Rick slipped in behind him, quiet but noticeable. Jamal looked over, just enough to make eye contact. Charles noticed too. "Rick, we're good in here." "Oh, I just need to—" "We're good," Charles repeated, more firmly this time. Rick paused, then nodded and stepped back, the door clicking shut behind him. The room was silent for a second, then Jamal smiled slightly. "So, let's talk about what we're building here." He took his seat at the head of the table, not rushed, not dramatic, like he'd been sitting there for years, but that silence still lingered, and Jamal knew why. Half the people at the table were wondering the same thing Rick had been thinking just minutes earlier. How did he get here? He could feel it in the way they watched him, the way they waited for him to say something that would validate the room, as if success needed to come with subtitles, as if a three-piece suit and title weren't enough without a backstory that made them comfortable. Jamal opened his folder, looked up, and said, "Before we get into numbers, I want to make something clear." Eyes sharpened. Pens were lowered. "I didn't come here to blend in. I came to lead. I came to clean up what should have been fixed 5 years ago. I came to build something that doesn't need to check someone's shoes before they're allowed in the room." Nobody said a word. Even the air conditioner seemed to go quiet. But Jamal wasn't done. Because before he talked balance sheets, he had something else to put on the table. Something you can't measure in profit margins. Jamal let the silence stretch, not to intimidate, but to make space for the weight of what he'd just said to settle in. He looked around the room. Some glanced down. Others held his gaze, uncertain of what to say. A few shifted in their seats like they suddenly remembered how small they were in that moment. Then, without changing his tone, Jamal continued, "Now, let's take a look at where things stand post-merger." He flipped a page in his binder and began walking the room through the current state of Stratwell Solutions. Revenue plateaus, overspending on underperforming contracts, outdated partnerships, weak culture, no direction. "You've got the parts of a great machine," he said, tapping the folder, "but someone's been driving it with the emergency brake on." A nervous laugh tried to sneak out from one of the directors. Jamal didn't smile. "I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to release that brake." From that point on, he had them. His delivery was sharp, but never rushed. He gave numbers when he needed to, stories when the room got stiff, and asked questions that demanded more than buzzword answers. He didn't pretend to know everything, but he knew enough to remind them who signed their checks now. And they listened. Not because they were impressed, but because they were realizing something. This man had been underestimated the moment he walked in the building, and now they were playing catch-up. About halfway through, Charles leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "I have to say, Mr. Preston, you've clearly done your homework." Jamal nodded once. "I've been doing my homework since I was 15. I just never got to turn it in until now." There it was again, that pause, that moment where the room had to sit with who he was and how far he'd come. And just when things seemed to hit a rhythm, the door creaked open. Rick, carrying a water pitcher and some glasses. He didn't make eye contact, just started filling cups like it was any other Tuesday. But the room noticed, Jamal especially. Rick set a glass next to Jamal without a word and moved to the next chair. Jamal didn't stop him. He let it play out. Let the discomfort rise on its own. When Rick finished and turned to leave, Jamal spoke up. Rick. Rick froze, slowly turned back around. Yes, sir? I'm sure you have a lot of responsibilities today, but when you get a second, I'd like you to sit in on the next half of this meeting. Rick blinked. I'm just facilities, sir. Not sure I'd follow all the... You work in this building. That makes you part of this team. Grab a chair. There it was. You could see it in the room. The way people shifted again, not out of judgment, but because something had just been taught without ever sounding like a lesson. Rick hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. He pulled a chair from the wall and sat against the far end of the table, quiet, still, but fully present. Jamal continued. He didn't address what just happened. He didn't need to. But the tone of the room had changed, and what came next would dig even deeper into who Jamal really was, and why that moment wasn't just about a water pitcher. The energy in the room had shifted, not because Jamal raised his voice, not because he demanded anything, but because he made space for truth, for discomfort, and for someone like Rick to sit where he usually wouldn't be invited. That kind of move sticks with people. It makes them rethink their own seats. Jamal picked up the remote and clicked the screen to the next slide. Let's talk partnerships, he said, voice smooth, confident. Who we keep, who we let go. Who's actually adding value and who's been coasting under the old guard. People started scribbling notes. This part wasn't theory. It was action, real names, real contracts. Jamal wasn't throwing darts in the dark. He came prepared. Every vendor, consultant, and subsidiary had been analyzed over the past 6 months, quietly, thoroughly. He turned to Danielle Cruz, head of strategic operations. Danielle, what's your honest take on Ferrotech? Danielle hesitated, eyes darting toward Charles. Jamal noticed. I'm not here to punish honesty, he said. If you have to look at someone else before you speak, we're already off track. Danielle sat up straighter. Ferrotech's been riding the prestige of their name. Their numbers are slipping. They know it. We know it. Jamal nodded. They get 1/4. After that, we cut loose. And just like that, without a vote, without a drawn-out debate, things started moving. Not because Jamal demanded it, but because he led it. Every question he asked had purpose. Every decision had a door behind it, either open or closing. And the people in that room started to realize they weren't dealing with someone who needed their approval to act. He turned to Charles next. Tell me something you think I don't know. Charles blinked. Excuse me? Something about this company, or this team. Something you figured I'd eventually find out, but you didn't expect it on day one. Charles shifted, caught between honesty and self-preservation. Finally, he said, There's been talk about a second round of layoffs. Some folks upstairs thought it might be easier to let you be the one to announce it. Jamal didn't blink. They figured I'd be the cleanup man. More or less, Charles admitted. Jamal paused, then leaned back in his chair. I'm not against cutting what's dead weight, he said, but I don't do scapegoats. If layoffs happen, it's because they were necessary, not convenient. And no one hides behind my name to save face. The table was silent. Even Rick, still quietly seated near the edge, looked up. This wasn't about ego. This was about integrity. Jamal closed the folder. Here's what's going to happen, he said. We're going to finish this meeting, and by the end of the week, I expect every department head to give me a straight report. No sugar, no fluff, just truth. We've been surviving. I want us building. He looked around, not a raised eyebrow in the room. Sound fair? Charles cleared his throat. Fair and overdue. Danielle nodded. Honestly, I've been waiting for someone to say this out loud. Others murmured agreement. Then quietly from the end of the table, Rick spoke. If I can say something? The room turned toward him. Jamal gestured. Go ahead. Rick looked uncomfortable, but he didn't back out. I misjudged you earlier. Not just you. I think I've been working here too long, assuming certain things. Because that's how it's always been. Jamal didn't interrupt. He let him finish. I didn't see a CEO when you walked in. I saw someone I didn't expect to be in charge. And that's on me. I was wrong. No dramatic apology, no emotional outburst, just plain words, truthful, honest. Jamal nodded slowly. Takes guts to say that. I appreciate it. He looked at the others. And I hope nobody here thinks Rick's the only one who's been doing that. Some looked away. Others didn't move. That stops now, Jamal continued. This company doesn't grow with gatekeeping. We move forward together, or we don't move at all. Silence again. But this time it was different. It wasn't discomfort. It was respect. But what none of them knew yet, what Jamal hadn't shared, was how personal all of this was. Because this meeting wasn't just about the company. It was about the road he had to take to even sit at that table. Jamal stood at the window after the meeting ended, the city stretching out in every direction. Phoenix had a strange way of feeling both wide open and closed off at the same time. He stayed back while the others filtered out, some still stealing glances at him, like they were seeing him for the first time. Rick gave a small nod as he exited. It wasn't much, but it was something. Charles lingered. You handled that well, he said. Jamal nodded. Thanks. Charles hesitated at the door. You ever get tired of having to prove it? Jamal didn't answer right away, just looked out across the rooftops. Then he said, You want the truth? Always. I stopped expecting not to. And with that, Charles left. Jamal stayed at the window. The quiet gave him space to breathe, but his mind, it went somewhere else. Back to a 2-bedroom apartment in Mesa, Arizona. A place where the swamp cooler rattled all night and the blinds never quite closed all the way. He was 15, working after school at a gas station off Dobson Road, stocking shelves, wiping windows, pretending not to hear the comments people made when they thought he wasn't listening. His mother, Charlene, was a home health aide. 16-hour shifts, 2 buses, no complaints. You don't wait for a seat, baby, she used to tell him. You bring your own chair. He never forgot that. It was senior year when the counselor looked him in the face and said, Maybe start thinking about trade school. A kid like you, college might be a stretch. That stuck too. Not because he believed it, but because someone said it to him like they were doing him a favor. Instead, he took community college classes at night, got into ASU through a scholarship he had to apply for 3 times because they lost his paperwork. Graduated near the top, worked every job no one else wanted. Mailroom, internships where he fetched coffee, but also studied the patterns, who talked, who listened, who really made decisions. He started Preston & Co. Ventures from a desk wedged between his bed and a broken fan. Used a second-hand laptop. His first big deal was a company no one wanted, bleeding money and reputation. He cleaned it up, sold it, did it again and again. Not loud, not flashy, just consistent, smart, relentless. And still, almost every room he walked into, someone asked if he was in the wrong place. He thought of the time he flew to Seattle for a pitch, landed at SeaTac, walked straight into the building he'd studied for months, and was told by security, deliveries are through the side entrance. He didn't argue. He smiled, then walked in 5 minutes later, through the front doors, with the investor who had just picked him up from the parking lot. It never stopped. Even now, after millions in deals, after being quoted in articles, listed on panels, invited to speak at Stanford, someone like Rick still saw someone who didn't belong. That wasn't bitterness, it was reality. But Jamal had learned to use it, not to make people pay, but to make them see. The flashback faded, but the weight stayed with him. Back in the present, Jamal turned from the window, collected his things. He didn't need applause, he wasn't looking for redemption, he was building something. And if that meant being the lesson while also leading the room, so be it. But the day wasn't over, and sometimes the real work begins after the meeting ends. Later that afternoon, Jamal found himself back in conference room B, this time with just a handful of people, department heads, the HR director, and a few senior staff. The energy was quieter now, more focused, less posturing. Rick was there too, not because anyone made him come, but because he chose to stay. Jamal set his briefcase down, didn't bother opening it. No slides, no charts, just him. I called this follow-up because we need to talk about something I didn't cover earlier, he said. Something more important than numbers. He scanned the room. Eyes met his, some more confident than others. You all know my title, but what you may not know is how I've spent my career walking into rooms like this, only to be treated like I wandered into the wrong one. He paused. Let that land. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not mad, but I need you to understand what that does to people when you're constantly asked to prove that you belong, even after you've already done the work. That changes how you move. No one interrupted. Even Rick leaned in, hands folded on the table. We talk about productivity, about performance, but we rarely talk about perception and how dangerous it can be. He pointed, not at anyone in particular, but into the space between them. How many good ideas have we ignored because they came from someone we didn't expect to be smart? How many people never got promoted because we were too comfortable choosing someone who looked the part instead of someone who earned it? He stepped around the table now, not pacing, just walking, measured. We can change the numbers, but until we change the way we see people, we're just repainting rust. There it was again. Silence. But now, it was reflection. The HR director, Denise, finally spoke. You're right, she said softly. And it starts in rooms like this. Jamal nodded. It starts with accountability, not in emails or slogans. In moments. Like earlier. He looked toward Rick. Rick met his eyes and nodded once, quiet but sincere. I judged a man I didn't know, Rick said. Not based on anything real, just what I expected to see. Jamal didn't thank him. He didn't need to. I've done that too, said one of the marketing leads. Not just about race, age, background, accent. I've done it and justified it. That honesty cracked something open. More people nodded. No one was trying to hide anymore. Jamal stepped back to his seat. Look, I'm not here to make everyone feel guilty. That doesn't build trust. What does? Owning the truth and deciding to do better. He leaned forward. So let me be clear. If we're building this company right, there's no type of person who belongs here. I don't care where they came from, how they dress, what school they went to. I care if they show up, do the work, and help the people around them grow. He glanced toward the glass wall where the city pulsed outside, unaware of the change happening inside one quiet room. This isn't about being politically correct. This is about being humanly correct. People looked at each other differently now. You could feel it. Something had shifted. Not all the way, but enough to start something real. I'm going to ask each of you to do something by next week, Jamal said. Find one person in your department you've overlooked. Talk to them. Ask them what they need. Give them one opportunity. Just one. He stood. And if that's too much, you're probably not the leader you think you are. But even with that lesson laid bare, there was still one more piece to this day, and it was about to hit much closer to home than anyone expected. The building was quieter now. Most of the staff had left for the day. Desks sat empty, chairs tucked in, coffee mugs drying by the sink. The artificial light gave the floor a slightly bluish tint, and somewhere down the hall, the janitor's vacuum hummed faintly. Jamal stayed behind, not because he had more work, because his mind was still working through something he hadn't said in that meeting. He stepped into the small break room to grab a bottle of water, and there was Rick, leaning against the counter, sipping lukewarm coffee like it might give him courage. They locked eyes, no tension, just two men in the same space, finally, without the noise of an audience. You got a minute? Rick asked. Jamal nodded. Sure. Rick looked down for a second, then spoke. I've been with this company 18 years, watched 5 CEOs come and go. Most of them didn't even notice I existed. Jamal didn't interrupt. Rick kept going. Today, when you told me to sit down in that meeting, I don't know what you meant to do with that, but it got to me. Jamal took a slow sip from his water. I meant to do exactly that. Rick half smiled, embarrassed. I thought you were trying to make a point. I was, Jamal said, but not just to the others, to you too. Rick nodded. I deserved it. Jamal shrugged. You didn't know me. You saw what you saw. We all carry stuff. But now you've seen more, and you're still here. Rick looked him in the eye. If there's ever anything I can do, I mean that. Jamal studied him for a second, then spoke quietly. There is. Rick leaned forward slightly. Yeah? Make sure the next time someone walks through that lobby, Jamal said, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Before the badge. Before the name. Rick swallowed. I can do that. They stood in silence for a few moments. Not awkward, just settled. I won't forget this day, Rick said, voice low. You're not supposed to, Jamal replied. And with that, Rick left the break room, shoulders lower than before. Not in defeat, just lighter, different. But this wasn't just a turning point for Rick. It was one for everyone who thought power only looked one way. Jamal stepped out of the building just past 7 p.m. The sun had dropped low, painting the Phoenix sky in shades of burnt orange and dusty purple. The streets were calmer now. A light breeze pushed dry leaves across the pavement. He paused at the edge of the sidewalk, hand resting on the roof of his car. Just stood there, watching the world move around him. In the distance, 2 teenagers were laughing near the bus stop. One of them had a suit bag slung over his shoulder, too young for it to be work. Maybe a school event, maybe something bigger. Jamal watched them for a moment, then smiled to himself, because he remembered what it felt like to be that age, holding ambition in one hand and self-doubt in the other, wondering if the world would ever make room, or if you would have to keep carving out a space just to stand in it. He unlocked the car, opened the door, but before he got in, he looked back at the Stratwell building, glass gleaming, office lights flickering out one by one. Today, it wasn't just a company that changed, it was perspective. It was awareness. It was the start of something harder than business strategy. It was culture. And that doesn't shift because of a title or a speech. It shifts when people choose to see better, to be better. He got in, closed the door, drove off into the city, and maybe, just maybe, someone would treat the next Jamal Preston a little differently. If this story made you think, even just for a second, share it. Talk about it. Reflect on it. Because change doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it starts in the lobby.